Welcome back to my Commodore 64 Memories videos. This is where I look at old Commodore 64 software and some of the technical details behind them. Today we have Enforcer Fullmetal Megablaster, released in 1992 by Golden Disc 64. Copyright CPU Verlag, The Enforcers. Concept, code and graphics by Manfred Trenz, and the musician by Marcus Siebold. I hope I've got your name right, Marcus. Imagine it was 1991 and I was just completing Turrican 2 and I saw this message. Turrican 2 will be my last game on the Commodore 64. And imagine how upset and sad this made lots of people feel. However, it wasn't true. But as we now know, in 1992, we saw this. And we're seeing this rather lovely title screen with a very nice vertical parallaxy star, or actually it looks more like snow effect, but I think it's meant to be stars or particles, right? But yeah, it looks more like snow to me. There's about 3 layers, I think, to this one. Now, if we go hunting through the graphics map here with the Vice ICU integrated debugging windows and the graphics map views, we can quite quickly see that we have this screen. Where was it? It was down at the beginning. We don't have anything else in memory, right? No, we don't. Not really. Let's look for character sets, but I'm pretty sure we know where the character sets are by now. We've got what looks like 2 character sets with some dynamic updating characters. That's what we can see there in the text screen view. There we go. So that's the title screen view. But if we change it to the character set, here we go. We have 2 character sets. The character set for the top logo, the Enforcer logo, and we got this star field, or snow rather, vertical falling particles. We have a whole screen, a whole blank screen full of that nice repeating pattern, which is probably used when compositing the graphics over the top. And then we have the other character set, I think, for the text and everything else like that underneath. So if we go to the next character set in the memory, let's turn off multicolor. There we go. We can see all of the text underneath the Enforcer logo. So this is a rather nice, lovely effect, with actually not using too many characters for the dynamic parallax scrolling particles, snow, stars, whatever they are. But it's certainly very well accomplished. I really do quite like that effect. It's put together really very well. I think there's a lot of vertical variation, which means that the repeating pattern is more difficult to see. We can see that we've got some sprites there, 8 sprites actually next to each other, to give some more color definition for those player ships, which are kind of like bookends around the Fullmetal Megablaster portion of the title screen. We can see on the bottom right the graphics map sprites view there. So the last bank is actually not very full of sprites, surprisingly. But we do have this rather lovely, colourful backdrop. Let's see if we can find anything else in memory first. I don't think we have anything else. There's a whole bunch of sprites here. There's a game over message. We've obviously got sprites for the player ship, and obviously got sprites for the enemies and things like that. There we go. There are the 2 text screens. There's the character set. So the character set is right at the beginning of memory, and then we have the 2 text screens, or right at the beginning of the last bank of memory, rather. You'll probably notice that I've got cheat modes turned on, and so I'm not dying. And that's because it's quite difficult to play this game and also to comment and move around all of the windows at the same time. So I've turned on cheat modes just to make my life easier. And because I'm terrible at playing these games these days, I think I lack the reflexes. Anyway, so we can see that it's using two double buffered text screens. So even though we've got all of this lovely graphical variation and it's certainly full of colors, it's not using bitmap. It's just using a couple of text screens with obviously defined character set. What strikes me about this game is that the sound effects as they're playing, they seem to be very heavily borrowed, don't they, from the previous games written by the author. That's not a surprise. I think maybe there was quite a lot of assets left over after Turrican, especially, and reusing all of these assets and just reusing the routines and the sound effects and everything like that just kind of like makes sense, really, doesn't it? It's certainly something that I would do. This is really fantastic. There's a ton of variation in this level. That great big planet coming along is really fantastic. So one thing to note is that most of the player weapons, not all of them, but most of the player weapons, especially the bullets and things like that, are characters onto the text screen. But I did notice there was a great big blue area being executed inside the memory there. So let's have a look at that memory address. We'll put a breakpoint around that memory location and we'll see what it's doing, because it was executing a whole lot of code. It was coming up as blue in the memory events window. So there we go. Wow. Oh gosh. Okay. So that looks like it is a completely unrolled color scroll. So this is what's called completely unrolled. It's like speed code, basically. There's no X or Y updates in terms of registers. It's just really doing load store, load store, load store, load store for the whole color RAM. So the color RAM is at D800 until just before DC00. Of course, the area under the score panel is not going to use color RAM scrolling, of course, because it's stationary. So it's not going to be the full 1000 bytes being moved by that unrolled speed code, but it's going to be quite a large chunk of memory. So we have this rather lovely large boss sprite, which again is not a surprise, right? We can see that the sprites are being included in the last sprite bank there, in the last graphics bank rather. But it's not completely full of sprite graphics. In fact, there's quite a lot of empty memory, blank empty memory. There we go. We've got this rather lovely semi-pseudo-randomized explosion going on as well, with a nice dissolve. The next level dissolves in, undissolves or whatever it is, transitions, I suppose, with this nice horizontal parallax scrolling layer. So the advantage of this game is that because it just scrolls from right to left in one direction, there's no variation in the direction of the scroll. The color RAM scroll can be completely optimized and completely unrolled into that speed code, which does really help. It does really help to even out the frame time for when you're scrolling on the Commodore 64, if you can do this, if you can spare the memory. Now the scroll for the main character screen is also, I don't think it's not using a completely unrolled loop, right? We can check that actually. So we'll look for a store at C900, which was one of the memory locations in that second screen, and there we go. It's not completely unrolled. It's still using the X register as an index. It's doing a decrement X rather, and a BPL, and going back to that. So it's doing a scroll in 3 character line chunks by the looks of that, between the on-screen and off-screen buffers for the double buffered screens. So yes, it's not using completely unrolled loops for copying the character screens, and that's okay, because it's actually doing, because it's got a known rate of scroll, a horizontal scroll. You don't need to scroll all of the character screen in the entire frame. The game breaks up the scroll for the character data. It's just that the color RAM, because the color RAM on the Commodore 64, you cannot double buffer the color RAM for normal text screen mode, then it means that you have to basically, if you need to scroll a large enough color RAM, you need to chase the raster beam as it goes down the screen. You try and time it as much as possible and optimize it as much as possible, but at the end of the day, you have to shift quite a large amount of data for a 1 megahertz CPU, and you just have to try and chase the raster beam as fast as you can down the screen and try and avoid the display portion of the screen as you're trying to copy all of this data for the color RAM. But for the screen, because you can have more than one screen in memory, of course, and flip between them just by having a single register, right? Or maybe two if you're going across the bit banks, the 16K bit banks, then of course it's a lot easier to just flip between two double buffered screens. And then we're greeted by this rather lovely level as well. I think the graphics on this level are quite striking. The graphical variation between these levels is very varied, also quite striking. For some reason, the graphical style on this level reminds me of Terminator, or was it Terminator 2? In the arcade, which was like a horizontally scrolling kind of like gun type game, I think it was. And the graphical style reminds me of one of the levels on I think it was Terminator. It was definitely Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think it was Terminator. It had some scaled sprites and stuff like that, but it was basically a horizontally scrolling light gun game, or not light gun, but very similar. He had a gun and stuff like that, but it's a very familiar graphical style, or it reminds me of the graphical style. As the game gets busy, you can see that we've got some sprite dropout, and that's interesting. You'll notice that when we've got the shield on, left, right, and the middle portion, the player comes on every alternate frame when the shield is not being displayed. So we have this sequence of 3 for those 3 sprites. It seems to bounce around between the two. So this reduces the number of sprites in a horizontal band, of course, which helps the multiplexer when trying to display enemies and stuff like that on the screen, and explosions and things like that. But yeah, this is kind of like sprite flickering techniques to basically increase the number of apparently rendered sprites. And because we're updating at 50 frames a second in this PAL version, then you don't tend to notice the flickering that much. And actually it fits quite well, I think, with the style of the player's shield. So you have these shield things to the left and right of the player ship, and the player ship just kind of like flickers in and out of phase with the shields. I think it works really quite well. But isn't this graphical style lovely in this game? And yeah, I mean, the game gets very, very busy. These sprites, definitely, right? These airplanes, they're definitely in one of the horizontally scrolling games, aren't they? On Turrican 2, maybe? On one of those horizontally scrolling levels. But yeah, we have another large sprite grid, multi-sprite boss. Lovely animation frames, but of course all of the animation frames, all of the spider legs and everything, you can see they're on the they're just in the sprite bank in the bottom right hand corner there. So let's have a look. We're not storing anything, and there we go. We hit a breakpoint as soon as I hit the fire. So yes, we can see here that this is the code This is the code which stores the bullets and everything else from the player into the two screens, actually. So it's storing into both double buffered screens. We have a load and a store there. We can see that the bullets are being updated into both of the double buffered screens, even though it's only really rendering one screen. And we have those two memory addresses, 61 and 62, 63 and 64, which are indirected memory addresses, and they were both pointing to the two double buffered screens there. So let's use the graphics map editing view here to copy some of these cloud characters. So yeah, we can conclusively show that it's just displaying the right hand, the bottom right hand double buffered screen there. It's not showing the left hand screen at all, which is intriguing, because the Commodore 64 screen would be flickering and showing those different character arrangements, right? But it's only really showing character arrangement on the right hand side. So we have a lot of bullets being rendered into both double buffered screens, but it's only showing one screen, which I suppose that's fair enough, because if you have a routine which is optimized for displaying the bullets into both double buffered screens, so that when you're scrolling you automatically get the bullets visible across those double buffered screens when they flip over. I guess if you have that one optimized routine for doing that, you don't really want to waste memory and have another whole routine for just optimized for displaying the bullets in one screen. Right, you might as well just reuse the routine. There's no scrolling going on, so you don't need to really save the CPU time for drawing the bullets by only drawing the bullets into one screen. Then we get this rather lovely level here. This level is also really quite good. This makes really great use of high-res parallax scrolling. So because we're doing a full color scroll, we can have a mixture of high-res and multicolored characters. And in the background there, we can just have these nice kind of like red high-res background parallax scroll areas to the screen, and it's a really effective transition between the level graphics. We have a ton of sprites all over the screen, don't we? The multiplexor is really being exercised extremely well in this game, right? Yet more sprites falling down the screen. And then we get another level boss at the end with a nice rotating kind of like spiky things that you have to shoot first, I think. Or maybe they just partially block the player's bullets. Anyway, with cheat mode on, it's actually quite easy to defeat that boss. So I think this is the last level of the game. We have that nice fade in transition, which is just basically a wipe over the screen. Or dissolve, I guess you could call it. So this last level, look in the sprite bank in the bottom right hand corner there. The sprite bank is almost full of sprite animation frames. And I think this is going to be a hint, right? There's something large coming along. I think we have some more kind of like Turrican-y type graphics here, along with the high-res in the background parallax scroll bands as well. They work really quite well intermixed with the multicolored characters. And here we go, the end of level boss again. Oh yeah, no, it's not the last level, is it? The last level is maybe the next one. Gosh, my memory has played tricks on me. But this is, again, a large kind of like sprite sheet almost, if you like. Quite a standard way of having the form of this kind of like end of level boss guardian type thing, a horizontal scroller where you've got the tentacles coming out to the side and you have to shoot the middle bit, right? Very common theme. Okay, and again we have parallax scrolling, high-res background. This character set used for the background parallax scroll and also the foreground. Wow, okay, this is definitely very reminiscent, right, of one of the later levels in Turrican 2, I think it was, that looked a lot like this and you could jump around and stuff. Very, very familiar. But the multiplexor again is being exercised very well. And then coming up to the end of level, wow, look at that. There we go. That's the one that I remember. This is the last level, right? Look at all of those animation frames. Look at how many sprites are being used. That's not background graphics on the right hand side. That's all sprites. It's a huge, great big sheet, grid of sprites. And we can see that the sprite bank there is pretty much full. There's hardly any space left. But isn't that fantastic? Isn't that a fantastic end of level, end of game boss to be greeted by when you get this far through the game? It reminds me kind of the great big claw monster, I think, in Turrican 2, I think it was, where the great big claw thing would bash against an opening in the cliff face with its outstretching claw thing. That was really very impressive. And then we get the game complete load, I think. So we have this nice colourful static screen with a scroller over the top. If you notice on the graphics map on the bottom right hand corner there in the sprites, we can see the sprites are getting calculated every few frames, and it's adding the text to the sprites that get displayed on the screen. So it's kind of like rolling up a large grid of sprites along the middle of the screen, and then as text comes along, more text gets calculated into those sprites. And it's kind of like a round robin kind of approach, that the sprites are continuously scrolling up the screen, and then more data is added to the sprite grid that's being moved up the screen. I hope you enjoyed playing this game. Yes, I did, very much so. Unfortunately, I could not find an original D64 or tape version of this game, so unfortunately I had to use a hacked, packed and cracked version, but at least then I could turn on the infinite lives and invulnerability cheats, which made this a whole lot easier. So yes, if you like these kind of technical deep dive videos, then please do consider liking or subscribing to this channel, or sending me a super thanks. They are always very much appreciated. Take care, have a great day, evening or night, wherever you are.